Good evening and welcome to today's talk on loneliness versus solitude. Welcome to everyone, and my name is Rona Schweitz, and I've been a meditator and a student with the Brahma Kumaris for the past 25 plus years. And at present, I am based in the Manhattan Meditation Center, a branch of the Brahma Kumaris in New York. Tonight's talk is a very interesting one, and especially in these times where everyone is practicing or thinking or concerned about the physical distancing, social distancing in the present situation in the world with the pandemic going on. And so we want to explore a little bit deeper this aspect of loneliness versus solitude. And loneliness, our medical scientists and psychologists and psychiatrists are telling us that loneliness in itself is becoming an epidemic. And the consequences of loneliness, there are some of our social scientists who are saying that many of the problems today, at its root, there is this phenomena of loneliness. They link crime with loneliness, they link depression with loneliness, they link anxiety with loneliness, they link violence and violence in relationships with loneliness. And so there is the view that loneliness is a root cause of many, many, many other problems. And so tonight we would like to explore a bit the spiritual angle of this phenomena and what is the difference with solitude. And I made a little sketch. I'm not an artist. It will help us understand this phenomena a bit deeper. When we think of companionship or relationships or harmonious relationships or the experience of loneliness, we many times think about human to human interaction, and we think about a certain quality of interaction, or maybe sometimes we just think about physical closeness. And I think that is where we can make a mistake or where we can overlook certain things. And it is very well possible that we think about this phenomena of loneliness or this phenomena of harmonious relationships or intimate relationships or companionship. Maybe we are thinking about this in a bit of a superficial way. And so we will try to explore this in a simple way, but a bit more in depth. When we are talking about companionship as opposed to feeling lonely, what is it that I'm thinking about? Is it that I'm thinking about the absence of others? around, the physical absence, the fact that I'm living alone, that no one is living with me, that might be very limited because I have people who have told me they are lonely whilst they are in a relationship, whilst they are living with someone, or where they are living in a family or in a community, and still they feel lonely. So feeling lonely or feeling accompanied is not necessarily the absence or the presence physically of someone. Because people feel lonely when they are physically alone, but people also feel lonely when they are with others, when others are around, or even when they are in intimate relationships. So, what is it that makes that companionship as opposed to loneliness? And there are other factors in our existence than just the physical factors and the body and the presence of someone else physically. People can be physically together, but their thoughts and their feelings are worlds apart. And so, in my thoughts, in my feelings, in my aim, in my interests, in my intentions, I might still be alone, even though I'm physically with someone else. And if there is no one with whom I share similar thoughts, similar interests, a similar task, or a similar aim, I may very well feel very lonely. And I may even physically hold hands, but still we are worlds apart. And so I might still be very lonely within my own inner world, my own world that doesn't match the inner world of someone else, that doesn't touch the inner world of others. The same with perspective or vision or ideas or my values. If there is not an alignment of ideas, an alignment of values, an alignment of vision, an alignment of perspective, we are not truly accompanying each other. We are not truly in the company of each other. But in our present day culture, in our present day world, we have become almost, how to say this, entered into a very limited consciousness. We have entered into a limited perspective on self, a limited perspective on relationship, a limited perspective on quality of interaction also. And our focus and our attention has become also very limited. When we think of ourselves, do we think of ourselves in terms of this whole range of things? Or is much of my vision and perspective of myself based on my physical appearance and position and possession and some people around me, and that is it? Or do I define myself also based on my thoughts and feelings, based on my values and principles? Do I define myself based on my perspective on life, my vision, and the way I see myself, the way I perceive the self? That is the way I will see others and perceive others also. And so, one way is if there is physical company, there is physical touching, I hold hands with someone or I touch physically someone, that is something that at present, in our present situation worldwide, has become very limited. And if I'm physically living alone, I will definitely be deprived of physical touch. But does that mean that I have to feel alone? Or does that mean that I have to feel lonely? I definitely will. If if I have lived my life with main focus on the physical and the physical aspect of our existence. But if there is alignment in thoughts and feelings with friends or with colleagues or with other family members, then our companionship is already a level deeper than just physical touch. I can be with someone in the same room without touching, but feel very close because our thinking is alike. Our feelings are similar. Our interests are similar. The things that we are discussing or exchanging are similar. Then I can feel a deep connection and a deep bond without the necessity. If my attention and my focus has shifted more to this level, then I can feel close with people even if they are not physically present. And that is what is being developed more and more now at present in this time of physical and social distancing. We are communicating much more through other means, through the possibilities that technology is offering us. So we can communicate, we can talk, we can listen and hear, but it becomes more and more an exchange of ideas and of thoughts and of feelings than just physical touch. And so if I move more in this sphere, I can feel companionship. I can experience being accompanied and not being alone. And so this is also an invitation to explore in our life and in our interaction with others more this dimension also as a method to not be so dependent on physical presence or physical uh, touch or physical acknowledgement, uh, to feel alive, to feel happy, to feel accompanied. But there is another level, and this is where solitude comes in. There is another dimension to our existence, and that is what we would like to call the spiritual dimension to our existence. And that spiritual dimension includes a spiritual perspective also, a spiritual vision on life. In ordinary consciousness, we think of ourselves as human beings, and we think of ourselves as social beings. We think of ourselves as being born at a certain time and in a certain place, in a certain context, in a certain culture, in a certain religion, maybe in a certain economical context, and we think of ourselves as beings who grow up, learn certain things, accumulate certain things, maybe get an education, maybe a higher education, and our life becomes uh, successful or not based on what we accumulate and based on what we do. And we get maybe into a family life, and we accumulate possessions and position, and then gradually over time there comes a moment that that active part of life becomes less, and we get into old age, and then we die. Many of us grow up with that um, idea of life, that model of life. There is a moment of birth and there's a moment of death, and the quality of life is dependent on what we can accumulate during that life and whom we can have around us. That decides our happiness, that decides our peace, that decides our um, experience of life, and that decides the quality of our life. And some of us question this model, and some of us as if perceive that there might be something more to life and something deeper, something higher that we are not perceiving. And in this talk on loneliness and solitude, definitely we should explore more this spiritual dimension. And this is what happens in solitude. In solitude, you take time and explore that non physical, that spiritual dimension of life. In solitude, you take time out to as if withdraw from all the external things and become more and more aware of yourself as an experiencer. You become more and more aware of your inner faculties like mind and intellect. You become more and more aware of the self as an observer of this body, an observer of life. In solitude, it becomes more tangible, the silent aspects of our existence. And so, whilst loneliness is a state of distress and a state of feeling a lack, missing, loneliness is a state where we feel a certain neediness. Loneliness is a state where we feel disconnected. Solitude is a stage where you almost as if look inwards. Solitude is a state where you cherish silence, cherish a certain introspective state where you are analyzing self and observing life from a different angle. Is there something more that we are as if overlooking? Is there something higher that I am missing out on? Not to give a simple, maybe even gross example, a friend of mine some years back, he has a background of alcoholism and gambling, bit of a wild life background. And at some stage, he kind of sobered up and he started on a spiritual journey and he began to meditate. And one day he came to the center very enthusiastic And he said, Rona, Rona, come outside, come outside, come outside. And he was so enthusiastic and so insistent with a big smile on his face. And he took me outside and he showed me the moon. There was a big full moon and it was low on the horizon, so it was huge and looked beautiful. And he was so touched by it and so enthusiastic about it. And I said, have you ever seen this? This is so beautiful. And I said, it's beautiful. Yes, I agree. But I have seen it and I've seen it several times. And he told me it is the first time that I ever remember that I saw the moon and that I saw how beautiful the moon is. And he said for 20 years, every night he was out. Every night, the city that he lived in was built on the ocean shore, and there was one of the main roads crossing the city was next to the ocean. And he said, I almost every night I would drive on that road near the ocean, and there must have been full moons like this for more than 20 years. And he said, I never saw it. I never seen like this, and I've never felt that. And what he said, I was so absorbed in my limited uh, uh, perspective and my limited thinking and desires and interests, I wasn't even aware of what nature was offering me, what was in the sky. And so that night he became aware of how beautiful the moon is, how beautiful the night sky is, how beautiful the stars in the sky are. And it made him so excited. Now, this is what solitude does with us, or what we can do when we choose solitude. We become more aware, more receptive of things that have always been there, but we have not noticed it. And so, as opposed to in loneliness, in solitude, we experience the richness of everything we have and of everything around us, and even of those people who are around us. We begin to become more aware of little things that we normally overlook. Whilst in loneliness, there is actually a more and more and more and more limitation of my perspective and my thoughts and my feelings, because there is a sense of lack, there is a sense of wanting, there is a sense of needing, there's a sense of desires. And so things that are offered to me, I don't even notice them, I don't even see them. In solitude, what can also happen is that we become more aware of the different facets and aspects of our own personality and of our own potential. In solitude, if we begin to observe in a more spiritual way, we begin to observe that there is a physical aspect to me, and of course, there is a thoughts going on and feelings, which is part of the inner being, the inner me, the being of consciousness. I become aware that there is an experiencer, one who is experiencing this body, one who is experiencing the different scenes of life. And so in solitude, we can become aware more and more of the fact that there is this physical dimension and there is this non physical dimension, and that we are actually non physical beings or spiritual beings who are temporarily in this physical dimension. We are like guests in this physical world. And so solitude is a state of inner, how to say, it is a silence, but it is not a dead or, or empty silence. It is a silence that is filled with a certain curiosity. Solitude is a state of inner exploration. And so your attention is not so much external and on others and things around and situations and past, present, and future, and what you want and what I don't have and what I need and what is not coming. Solitude is a state where the attention is more internally oriented and where we discover ourselves as beings of consciousness. And this is where it would be useful to have a little bit more of um, understanding of some spiritual concepts of self. In solitude, we can discover that our sense of identity in normal and ordinary consciousness, our sense of identity is what we have been describing. I see myself as a female, I see myself as a human being and of a certain age and a certain background. In solitude, I begin to discover the spiritual identity. I begin to uh, become aware of myself as a spiritual being, an invisible experiencer, the one who is experiencing this body, aware of this body, the one who is using these eyes to see, the one who is using these ears to hear, an inner being, being of consciousness. And so, in this more introspective, introverted mode, there is a certain richness that wakes up within me, a feeling of richness and a feeling of exploration. And so, this solitude can happen when there are others around. It can happen when even I am alone. Solitude is not a state of externally being externally oriented, but internally oriented. So whatever goes on around or not goes on around, that is fine. That internal state of solitude where we are beginning to grasp the depth of our own being, where we are beginning to uh, observe what life is actually all about. And For many people, it is easy to be in that internal solitude state if there is also external solitude and silence. So many times people withdraw from active life or withdraw from society or withdraw from their family and friends for a while to be in solitude and to explore that. But we can also be in solitude in that internally oriented frame of mind whilst being with others or whilst things going on around. And this is actually a very beautiful state, this state of solitude, whether it is physical solitude also or not, but at least that internal solitude, because it helps us to be more receptive to that spiritual dimension. And one of the things that um, I personally cherish is when I become more and more aware of the self as this invisible being of consciousness. And the image that we use is the image of a star, light, a being of light, a being of awareness, a being of consciousness, separate from the body, although using the body. Like a driver and a car, the body is like the vehicle, whilst the inner being, the driver. And so a driver gets into a car, drives the car, and then gets out of the car again. The driver is not defined by the car. And the beginning of the car doesn't mean the beginning of the driver, and the end of the car doesn't mean the end of the driver either. The driver gets into the car, we have a certain experience, and then the driver gets out of the car again. Now, if we use this same image for ourselves and we see the inner being or the being of consciousness as a driver and the body as the car or the vehicle, then we can begin to see how we are almost guests in the body. We are guests on this planet. The inner being, or another word that is often used, is soul. The inner being is a guest in this world, a guest in this body, a traveler through time. And solitude makes us more aware of this. We kind of know this also in ordinary consciousness, but we are too busy and we're so absorbed and involved in other things. Even though we may be lonely, we may be very busy desiring and needing, and our mind gets into this kind of tunnel-like frame where we only can see and perceive and think certain things and cyclical thinking going on. Whilst in solitude, we can become aware of this in a more conscious way. Truly, we are beings of consciousness. Truly, we are guests on this planet. Truly, we are guests in this body. I don't truly own anything. Even this body was a gift from nature for me to use, so it was entrusted to me. But at some stage, I will have to give this body back to nature. And so all these things we discover in solitude, that heightened awareness, that heightened receptivity for what we kind of know, but we never properly paid attention to. And we can position ourselves differently in life. If I don't truly own anything, I surely also do not truly own anyone. And if I don't own, I cannot lose. And once this dawns on us, we cannot really lose anything. Everything that comes to us in front is in front of us. Everyone that we interact with is as if a gift, extra gift, but it's not mine. So that stage of a certain freedom, a certain detached involvement becomes more natural in solitude. And so if I cannot lose anyone, then also there will be not that feeling truly of having lost anyone and the grief that comes from that. But another beautiful thing happens. More I become aware of this non-physical dimension, more I become aware of the self as this invisible traveler, invisible guest, this being of consciousness, soul. In solitude, I can become aware also of the fact that everyone else also is a soul. That what applies to me also applies to everyone else. We are all spiritual beings. We are all beings of consciousness. And that awareness creates a deeper sense of bond. We are all travelers on a journey. It creates a certain feeling of alignment. And others may be aware or not aware, others may have interest or not. But still, it is a thought that creates a sense of bond, creates a sense of togetherness. Even though there may not be any physical closeness, even though maybe in our ideas and in our interests and aims, we may be still very, very different. But in solitude and becoming aware of our existence as spiritual beings, beginning to understand and perceive everyone else also as a spiritual being, my brother. And those feelings of brotherhood, that feeling of a spiritual family of travelers, beings of light. We all are guests here on this planet, and we travel together through time and space. That creates a deeper sense of bond. That has the potential to heal feelings of loneliness, which are created by a consciousness that just operates on this level. And in the next sketch, try to sketch it even more. Rona doesn't have any talents, artistic talents for drawing, but enjoying it very much to do. But it also helps to clarify things. No? So this is the physical dimension and the bodies and animals and then maybe job and education and a culture and house and nature and dollars and pounds or euros and the electronic gadgets and all kinds of things are here. But there is the experiencer, the one who is a guest, the spiritual being who has come into the physical world, uses the body, travels, and at some stage leaves the physical dimension again. And if we as if use this broader perspective, wake up to this broader perspective, which is uh, which happens in solitude. We begin to perceive that broader perspective again. We begin to see the obviousness of the fact that we are guests. Guests mean we have come and we will go. No one has ever stayed here forever. We come and we go. So truly, we are guests. All of this becomes an extra gift. Every interaction becomes an extra gift. And so there is not that demand or that expectation. I have to have people next to me. I have to have physical company. And it is that expectation, that nature of demanding and expecting, that makes us so much more vulnerable for loneliness. It is when I expect that there should be people, when I desire that there should be people, that I feel lonely when they are not there. And so solitude is a very, very different state from loneliness. Solitude is a state of wisdom, a state of exploring and perceiving what is there. And in solitude, in inner silence, in that reflective stage, in that state of becoming aware of our existence as a spiritual being, it also becomes more perceivable and obvious the presence of the Supreme Being, the Supreme Soul. One who holds this perspective always, one who is always in a soul conscious state and therefore is always peaceful, always benevolent, and always in a feeling of love for all souls. More we become aware of ourselves as spiritual beings, more it becomes easy to feel that we are a family of spiritual beings and that we are connected throughout the whole journey as travelers, spiritual travelers. And so in solitude, all of this is possible. And this has the potential to heal any feeling of loneliness and to pull us out of the negative consequences of feelings of loneliness. And more we have these periods, extended periods or periods of solitude, the quality of this also increases. Now, my perspective becomes spiritual, my vision becomes spiritual, my ideas and values become spiritual, my interests, my thoughts, and my feelings become more noble. And once the quality of this increases, it is more likely that we will also attract people towards us. People who are on that similar wavelength, but also even if they are not, they will be more easily wanting to be in your company. They are more easily wanting to cooperate with you because you are, what would be the word, more kind, more peaceful, more pleasant. And so these are some of the things to think about. I feel loneliness is a characteristic of how far we have moved away from spiritual wisdom, how far we have moved away from our spiritual identity. Loneliness is an expression of the fact that we have almost lost sight of the spiritual truth of who we are and of our existence. And solitude is not necessarily something that you have to go for 6 months into the Himalayas and sit in a cave and sit in silence and chant Om 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. But solitude can be just a state of mind where you are more introverted. But you can combine it also with every day having moments of physical solitude. And so it is part of a more balanced life where you take time for self and to have 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour in a day to spend in solitude, to take time to reflect, to get to the essence of who you are and the essence of your being, to reflect on a bigger perspective on life and what this whole thing is all about. And in that sense, I think COVID-19 and the present situation in the world is almost like a wake up call. We had complicated our lives so much, made our schedules so busy. We have we have completely lost sight of the maybe even more important way things in our lives. It makes us blatantly aware of the fact that we have difficulty to just be at home, that we have difficulty to be alone, that we have difficulty to be with ourselves by ourselves. But at the same time, it makes us aware that we also have difficulty to be with our family because people 6 weeks within their house with the same people, there are many who are having a hard time with that also. So, on the one hand, we are lonely, but on the other hand, it is also difficult to be with people. And maybe that is because of the fact that we have never built in solitude in our lives. And so, this is an invitation to explore this a bit more. Every day, take some time to be in solitude. Physically, if possible, but internal solitude. These are some ideas on this topic, and I would like to invite you to explore them a bit more. We will do some meditation, and then we will close. So for a few moments, relax the body. Make sure the body is comfortable. Let the breathing be natural. And for a few moments, we completely accept everything as it is. There may be some noise, there may be someone walking in or walking out, or some tension in the body. We accept everything as it is. No need to think about it. And we withdraw all the attention from the external and create that heightened state of awareness, that state of heightened awareness. You are aware of the position of the body, of the breathing and the heartbeat. But now we also become aware of the one who is experiencing this body, the one who is listening through the ears, the one who is sitting behind the eyes, observing through the eyes that are like windows. And so we are aware of these two parts, this invisible experiencer and the body and the surroundings. And we perceive this invisible self as a presence, a living, conscious being. And with the eye of the mind, we hold this image of a tiny star in the center of the forehead, behind the eyes. Invisible, experiencer, a being of light who is a guest in this body, a guest on this planet. And the body has its expiry date, but the real I, the real self, is timeless. imperishable, and free. And so I just reflect on this spiritual, invisible being of consciousness, like a tiny star, an invisible traveler through time, imperishable, timeless, free. In solitude, it becomes so easy to perceive this noble nature of the real self, the soul. And as we continue the journey, we aim to stay with this awareness. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this talk and this experience and exploration of solitude as opposed to loneliness. Coming to the end of this 1 hour session, I would like to introduce the talk for next week, Tuesday. It will be on the meaning of true freedom, and Brother Yogesh Sharda from Turkey will be with you for that talk. Brother Yogesh is a teacher and a student with the Brahma Kumaris from almost his childhood, and he is presently based in Turkey, and he oversees the activities of the Brahma Kumaris in Turkey, but he travels widely. And so you will have the fortune of his company and his wisdom next week. Thank you, and have a good night.